Welcome back to my channel, everybody. My name's Max Convexity. Here we are on the last day of the year, so I thought it'd be a perfect time to look back at the year. I want to look at the Defiance funds, and also the Yield Max and Global X funds, and also JEP-I and JEP-Q, the JP Morgan High Yield Option Strategy funds. I want to look at the relative performance of each fund to its parent asset. I will also study the average relative performance of these fund families and draw some general conclusions. Stick around and we'll get right in the middle of it. This video, of course, has some caveats. This is based on a small sample size, as the Defiance funds haven't been around for all that long. I didn't use all the Yield Max funds. I used the Magnificent 7 plus Coney, but a lot of those have less than a year's data. In fact, I think the only one that does have a year's data is Tesla, and it's been around for 13 months, I believe. I didn't use the traditional Wall Street formula for tracking error. It's based on standard deviations, and it deals with the square root of time, and it is more accurate than my formula. My formula is more tangible and easier to understand. The way I calculated is just what percentage that the high yield fund was able to earn relative to the parent asset, and I think it's close enough for the purposes of this video, especially considering what a small sample size we have. This isn't a scientific study at all. At the end of next year, we could do the same study when I have a year's worth of data on all the funds, and it'd be a lot better, and I intend to do that next year. My methodology was this. If you look over on the right-hand side, here's a visual representation of what the fund earned, the high yield fund, and it's in blue. So in this case, Tesla earned 52%. The parent asset, Tesla, earned 101%. So the way I figured it was 101% is 49% more than 52%. And then on a percentage basis, that meant that Tesla got 51.49% of the upside available in Tesla. NVIDIA got 57% of the available upside relative to its parent, NVIDIA. NVIDIA earned 73%, not this year, but 73% over the same time period that NVIDIA has been around. NVIDIA earned 42% since inception. So that's really good. On a percentage basis, that looks better than Tesla. But on raw numbers, Tesla's doing really well with the 52% total return. AMSI actually out-earned its parent asset. That's why its relative upside is 105%. Good job, AMSI. Apple earned about 2/3 of its relative upside available from Apple. Infly just did not do well at all, and neither did GUI. I don't know what's going on with GUI. I have a feeling that the option premiums in Google are no good. Too low, in other words. That could always change, though. And it also didn't help GUI that the Google's pretty much flat. It's amazing if you think about this face ripper we've had, and Google's flat. MSFO is the Microsoft High Yield Fund, and it matched its parent asset over the pertinent time period, 12% and 12%, making 100% upside. FBY actually out-earned its parent asset, so that's why its relative upside is 187%. And then Coney, of course. Boy, look at Coney. Made 81% over the time that it's been around, whereas in the same time period, Coinbase was up 172%. They're both on fire. So in this case, Coney earned about half, a little less than half of its upside. So those are the single stocks up there. I put them in a separate category. You can see there's more variance in the single stocks. They go anywhere from -3 to 81, but that's because they're single stocks, and that's what we would expect. You know, I've always mentioned how I like indexes. I'm sure you guys are sick of hearing about it, but But, you can see visually here that the indexes have much less variance from high to low. Of course, they also don't have as high of highs, but they aren't going to have as low of lows. All right, so let's start with the JP Morgan funds. JEPI, which is the S&P tracking fund that sells, options, sells monthly covered calls, they had a total return of 9.3%, whereas the SPX earned about 25% over the same time frame. This meant the JEPI only captured 37% of the relative upside. JEPQ made up for it. JEPQ did really well. It earned 36%, which is a lot, in my opinion, for one of these high-yield funds. But the parent asset earned 54%. The more the parent asset can earn, the more that the high-yield fund can earn. But JEPQ, even considering how much the parent asset earned, it earned 66% of its parent asset. That's really high. QQQI did really good too. QQQI earned 70% of its parent asset. That was over a short time period, so take that with a grain of salt. Same thing with JEPY. JEPY earned 80% of its parent asset, also over a short time frame. IWMY earned about 38% of its parent asset. All right, and now dragging up the rear, QYLD, XYLD, and RYLD, they had the most problem and they had the hardest time capturing upside from their parent asset. I've made videos about it before, but there's two problems with the Global X funds. The first one being they use at-the-money options, and the second one being they use monthly options. Generally speaking, you get less tracking error if you use shorter term options, so dailies or weeklies. And generally speaking, you get less tracking error, i.e. more upside, if you use out of the money options instead of at the money options like Global X does. So that really didn't surprise me that they're dragging up the rear there. Okay, so let's look at the average. The average of all of them together was about 51%, and that's just a good rule of thumb to think about these high yield funds. Even on a total return basis, and after you factor in dividends, you're leaving about half the money on the table. It doesn't mean they're bad investments, because if you have a need for current income, these might fit your needs just perfectly. Talk to your financial planner. Just like when you buy a bond relative to stocks, you're leaving money on the table. Bonds don't generally have as much upside as stocks, but they pay higher amounts. You can get a bond fund that earns 5%, and if you buy the SPY, which is a stock fund, the dividend's 1.6%. So you earn about 3 times the money in a bond fund, but you also leave upside on the table. I didn't put bond funds in here, but I'm just speaking philosophically. All right, so the yield max average was 55%. So that's more than the overall average. That's pretty good. I say anything above 50% is good. Anything less than 50% could use improvement. It's suboptimal, so to speak. But YieldMax did really well. I mean, their average fund earned 25% total return. That's pretty darn good. And the parent funds earned 46%. So that's pretty good also. That's really good, as a matter of fact. And YieldMax, the YieldMax family caught a good portion of the upside. I would say 50% is basically par, so they earned 5% more than 50. That's really good in my opinion. Global X, now this really doesn't surprise me. Just given the way they structured their fund, they're going to leave the most upside on the table, and we can see it in the numbers. Their funds earned an average of 10.93% out of a possible 32% available, which came to about a 34% relative upside, so that's the lowest. Defiance is about average, a little bit more than average. Defiance earned 54%. And JP Morgan did really well. I would say that they're the standout of the night based on, this relatively small study and a small sample size. But not only did JetQ earn 36%, which is really good, and it was also 66% of its parent asset. That's huge. JetQ also earned more than the SPY. And if you think about that, the SPY is an ETF whose upside is not capped. They don't sell options in the SPY. It just goes up or goes down. You know, JetQ is based on the NASDAQ, granted, but its upside is capped and it still earned more than another index than the SPY did. I just thought the JetQ was the standout of this study. To make 36% total return, you know, and to capture about 2/3 of your parent asset upside, that's really good. Now, QQQI did well too, but it's a short sample size, or small sample size, so I'm discounting that. So this chart right here shows you the best average performance was definitely JP Morgan, but YieldMax and Defiance were both right in there. And then of course Global X. Poor old Global X just doesn't get any love, or not a lot of love from me anyway. It shouldn't surprise anyone how good Tesla and Coney looked. It was a little surprising that AMZ outperformed Amazon, and it was somewhat surprising to me how well FBY performed relative to Meta. JetQ was the big winner of the night. Congratulations, JetQ. We'll do one this time next year, and we'll see, and we'll get a better idea of some true numbers. You guys have a safe and happy New Year. It's about 11:30 here in the Central Time Zone. I'm going to turn on the TV and watch the ball drop and edit this video together. You guys will probably be seeing this video on New Year's Day. So have a great New Year's Day. Thank you so much.